AOC walked into that town hall believing it would be another safe, friendly exchange. What she didn't realize was that a sharp challenge was only seconds away. One Republican constituent stood up, calm and respectful, and framed his question carefully. At first it sounded simple. But beneath it was a fundamental issue that many politicians avoid: the true meaning of free speech. That's when the moment began to slip out of AOC's control.
I too am a registered Republican. However, my mantra of my life is always be willing to be wrong. So maybe you or some of my friends here can convince me to be a Democrat, okay?
I'll take you up on it.
I used to always call myself a demo pub anyway since I was a teenager. So all I'm just saying though is that growing even in the European socialist countries, in Europe and Canada, now you can easily face fines or imprisonment if you use critical hate speech against certain people groups.
The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. Instead, he made a bold claim: the greatest freedom in America isn't the freedom to agree, it's the freedom to hate. In many countries, he explained, critical speech can lead to fines or prison. In America, you can openly hate a sitting president without fear of arrest. That uncomfortable truth exposed a growing divide between constitutional freedom and political convenience.
I think we can all agree that love is the greatest aspect of humanity. But would you also agree that the greatest freedom in America and in any free country is the freedom to hate? And this goes to the debate on our college campuses. The freedom to hate is the greatest freedom because in many countries you cannot. And in America, you can hate, well, my time is a little bit taken, okay? In America, you can hate Donald Trump, and because it's not against the law, he cannot put you in prison. Isn't that a great thing? Okay.
Before AOC even answered, it was clear why the question mattered. For years, prominent Democrats have suggested that certain speech should be restricted. From misinformation to hate speech, the definitions remain vague, yet the calls for censorship grow louder. The man wasn't attacking anyone. He was challenging who gets to decide what speech is acceptable. And that question threatens control over the narrative.
Where you're trying to go here, and I think part of it is, I think at the bedrock of what you're discussing is freedom of speech, right, and the freedom of expression.
Right.
And that is what I would call it.
Yes.
I think that we have a freedom to express ourselves, but we should also know that in the United States, there are also limitations on our freedom of speech.
No, only if it involves violence or threats, things that are illegal. But that's not free speech, that's threat.
AOC responded by reframing the issue. She avoided the word hate and replaced it with softer language like expression and nuance. She acknowledged free speech, but immediately emphasized its limitations. That's where the shift happened. Instead of defending the First Amendment, she leaned into boundaries, exceptions, and gray areas. The argument was no longer about freedom, it was about regulation.
So I just want to throw some nuance into the conversation, and I'm not trying to have an argument here. I want to have a discussion.
When the man refused to back down and clarified that only violence and direct threats are illegal, the discussion reached a breaking point. Rather than engage, the moderators shut off his microphone. That single action said more than any speech ever could. When arguments start making too much sense, silencing becomes easier than responding. And in that moment, the concern he raised became real.
At the end of it, but I want to at least let you know my perspective. My perspective is that we absolutely have a protected freedom of speech. Someone can say, I hate so-and-so, and that is protected speech. When we think about one of the landmark freedom of speech cases brought down by the Supreme Court, one of those cases and one of the verdicts said another form of speech that is not protected is yelling fire in a crowded movie theater, because that will force people to trample one another. And so that's not protected speech.
AOC continued by invoking the classic fire in a crowded theater example. It's a familiar tactic, one often misused to justify limiting speech. But yelling fire causes immediate physical harm. Expressing hatred does not. By blurring these two categories, politicians create confusion. And confusion is powerful. When people can't tell the difference between speech and violence, censorship becomes easier to sell.
If there's a fire, right. Right, sir, but he's saying, in the landmark speech, no, sir, it's fine. Oh, sir, no, and you can turn his mic on. You don't have to cut it off. I did not ask that to happen.
Very much.
No, that's totally fine.
Unable to answer directly, AOC pivoted to Donald Trump and Ilhan Omar. She suggested that reposting Omar's own words somehow endangered her. The man immediately pushed back. Showing the truth, he argued, is not incitement. Calling truth dangerous is something far darker. At that point, the argument was no longer partisan, it was philosophical. Who decides what truth is allowed?
Where that line is played with so that we have plausible deniability to incite violence against people. I don't think that the president should have tweeted that video that he tweeted. Do I think he should have gone to jail for it? Absolutely not. But I don't think he should have done that. I think that by endangering Congresswoman Omar, he was playing with this line. And
well, I disagree. She endangered.
In the end, AOC never answered the original question. Instead, she reframed, deflected, and blurred definitions until the conversation collapsed. That's why moments like this resonate. The First Amendment is simple. The government does not decide what speech is allowed. Once that power shifts, freedom doesn't disappear overnight, it erodes quietly. And that's exactly what this exchange exposed.
that speech.
His right to show the truth of what happened is just as valid as her right to say whatever she wants to say.
And sir, that's why he's not being, that's why there's no charges being brought up
Being
against
criticized
him.
by you as though there should be charges. But I'm telling you that the greatest freedom is for us to allow anyone who wants to hate without violence, without threats, without incitement, and that is true.
That is true.
You're bringing incitement and hate speech together, which is totally absurd and fascist.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you.
This wasn't just a disagreement at a town hall. It was a warning. The moment speech needs permission, freedom is already slipping away. The man never called for violence. He never threatened anyone. He defended the right to express even uncomfortable ideas without government interference. And instead of debating him, his mic was cut. That's the real takeaway. Not who won the argument, but who wasn't allowed to finish it. Because history shows this clearly, societies don't lose freedom all at once. They lose it piece by piece, starting with the speech people claim is too dangerous to hear.
Gone to jail for it? Absolutely not. But I don't think he should have done that. I think that by endangering Congresswoman Omar, he was playing with this line. And
well, I disagree. She endangered.
Here's what many people don't want to admit. Hate speech is protected in America not because it's good, but because allowing the government to ban it is dangerous. Once officials get the power to decide which opinions are acceptable, that power never stays limited. Today it's hate speech. Tomorrow it's dissent. Freedom only works when it protects even the ideas we despise.
where that line is played with so that we have plausible deniability to incite violence against people. I don't think that the president should have.
The real issue exposed in this exchange wasn't emotion, it was definition. Words like hate, misinformation, and dangerous speech were used repeatedly, yet never clearly defined. That vagueness isn't accidental. When definitions stay blurry, enforcement becomes selective. And selective enforcement is how censorship disguises itself as safety.
So I just want to throw some nuances into the conversation, and I'm not trying to have an argument here. I want to have a discussion.
This debate isn't theoretical. Studies now show that a majority of college students believe both hate speech and threatening speech should be banned. That's alarming, because threats are crimes while hate speech is opinion. When young Americans are taught that feelings deserve the same protection as physical safety, the Constitution becomes optional instead of foundational.
Where you're trying to go here, and I think part of it is, I think at the bedrock of what you're discussing is freedom of speech,
Right.
and the freedom of expression.
Right.
And that is what I would call it.
Yes.
I think that we have a freedom to express ourselves, but we should also know that in the United States, there are also limitations on our freedom of speech.
No, only if it involves violence or threats, things that are illegal. But that's not free speech.
And so-
That's threat.
Rather than answer directly, AOC leaned on emotional framing. She spoke about danger, fear, and responsibility, powerful words that shift the audience away from facts. Emotion is effective, but it's also a shortcut. When logic fails, emotion fills the gap. That's not leadership. That's persuasion without accountability.
So I just want to throw some nuances into the conversation, and I'm not trying to have I'm not trying to have an argument here. I want to have a discussion.
The most revealing part of the night wasn't what was said, it was what was stopped. Cutting the microphone confirmed the argument more than any rebuttal could. If the ideas were truly flawed, they could have been defeated with words. Silencing only suggests fear of where the conversation was going.
So I just want to throw some nuances into the conversation, and I'm not trying to have an argument here. I want to have a discussion.
Clip 15. Defending free speech does not mean endorsing hateful ideas. That distinction was completely ignored. You can oppose racism, bigotry, or ignorance while still defending someone's right to speak. Confusing tolerance with endorsement is how debate dies and ideology takes over.
Gone to jail for it? Absolutely not. But I don't think he should have done that. I think that by endangering Congresswoman Omar, he was playing with this line. And
well, I disagree. She endangered.
This moment wasn't about AOC. It was about a cultural shift. A shift away from debate and toward control. When speech is regulated based on who feels offended, freedom becomes fragile. The First Amendment was written precisely to prevent this kind of power creep. And moments like this remind us why it still matters.